At the beginning of the story, we're introduced to a clan of swordsmen that rules half the world, known as the Run Candles. The members of this clan are born with powerful bodies and exceptional talent, becoming a dominant force thanks to their martial arts. Battles, raids, and even territorial domination make up the brutal world where only the strongest survive. And it was in this very clan that our protagonist, Jean Runcandle, was born. He's the youngest son in the family, and during the selection ritual, the event where a child's future is foretold, he chose the patriarch's sword. That choice marked him as someone destined to lead the clan. His father became very interested in his decision, and Jean truly believed his future would be filled with achievements and victories, but reality turned out to be nothing like he imagined. Despite belonging to a prestigious clan of swordsmen, he had absolutely no talent with a sword. That left the entire Runcandle family stunned. How could a Runcandle descendant be that bad with a blade? So, over time, he started gaining the reputation of being the shame of the family, the weakest Runcandle. His siblings constantly mocked and laughed at Jean, all because he had no sword talent. One of them even joked that someone who chose the patriarch's sword shouldn't be so weak. They were twins. The white-haired one asked where the special sword he chose during the ritual was, but since Jean had no talent, he could only use a wooden practice sword. That made his brothers ridicule him even more. Jean stays silent, but his brother starts hitting him, demanding he answer whenever his older brother asks a question. After finding Jin's sword training notes, he bursts out laughing, saying that Jin's efforts would never amount to anything. When Jean asks his brothers to give back his notes, the other brother snaps his wooden sword in half. His excuse is that people with no ability shouldn't be given chances. When Jean tries to react, the other brother grabs him by the hair, because Jean had dared to say they didn't need to go that far. His brother answers, "What do you mean we don't need to?" The torment from his older siblings and Jin's pathetic sword talent made his life a living hell. He believed none of that mattered, though, and that he just needed to work hard to prove his worth. He thought that with enough effort, he'd finally be recognized and respected by his family. But then, one day, he is expelled from the clan. Standing before the closed gates, he remembers what they told him, that since his hard work was admirable, they wouldn't kill him. At 23, Jean becomes a wandering drifter with no direction. After some time, he meets his master and discovers something unbelievable. Even though he had no sword talent, he did have a talent, magic. But that talent was forbidden within the clan. 3 years pass, and Jean learns that by connecting nature's mana with a mage's mana, it's possible to restore his energy and strengthen his spells. During one of his training sessions, a dark energy takes over the room, and everything around Jean turns pitch black. A mysterious figure appears behind him, and when Jean asks who's there, the being introduces himself as Soderette, the Master of Shadows. He already knew who Jean was and asks if he would be willing to form a pact. Not only would Jean gain spiritual powers, but his curse would also be lifted. Here, we discover that Jean had been cursed in the past, and, because of that, had never been able to use his true talent, which led everyone to believe he was weak. When Jean asks about the curse, Soderette explains that it's called the Blade Illusion, a curse that suppresses sword talent. For a member of the Runcandles, that's extremely painful. Then Soderette reaches into the curse and removes it, saying that it was the reason he was drawn to Jean in the first place. He declares that from now on, no curse will ever torment him again. After freeing Jean, the being says that Jin's destiny has always been to become the magic swordsman of the century. Soderette tells him he will watch his journey with great interest. When Jean returns to his room, he grabs a sword to test whether everything he just heard is actually true. Outside the room, he starts swinging the sword, and right away he can feel the difference. It was exactly like Soderette said. Now the sword didn't seem to have any weight at all. Honestly, it felt like he was just moving his arm. As he kept testing out his attacks, he realized that if he used magic on top of it, he'd definitely be on a whole different level, and that now his training would finally show real results in swordsmanship. In that short practice session, he finally understands that his hard work could actually pay off now, that he could really become a great swordsman. But, man, on the next page, we see 3 soldiers, and on the next one, we see Jean screaming, blood pouring from his eyes. Hearing more screams around him, he notices his body suddenly feels extremely heavy. For some reason, he had been attacked without even seeing it coming. Buried under chunks of debris, he tries calling out to Soderette. But when he realizes he's alone, his strength starts fading, and he wonders if maybe he really was destined for nothing, since he didn't even get the chance to use his magic or the power Soderette had given him. Looking at everything around him, completely confused, he asks himself why he was even given a second chance, and then he dies. But something unexpected happens the moment he opens his eyes again. He realizes he's surrounded by members of the clan, and his hands are those of a baby. When he looks ahead, he sees several swords lined up and starts questioning what was happening, because he was absolutely sure he had died. Suddenly, a family member appears beside him, wishing him good luck. When he sees one of the swords and recognizes it, he starts piecing together where he is, because that sword is the blessed sword. And that's when he understands he has gone back to the past, and is at the run candle selection ritual 1 year earlier. In his previous life, he had grabbed that sword by coincidence. Crawling toward a certain sword, everyone around him is shocked, because he's going to choose the patriarch's sword. And Jean reflects to himself that, in this life, he's choosing himself. With that, the ritual ends, and Jean is taken to the Storm Castle. 6 years after that selection, we see Jean trying to reach a book on a shelf. As he drags over a chair to climb up and grab it, he starts thinking about how 6 years have passed since he came to the Storm Castle. He's supposed to stay there until he turns 10, and being stuck in that place for so long was painfully boring. But suddenly, he hears the maid screaming. When he goes to ask what happened, she says she found a dead bird in his room. When Jean sees the body, he realizes the bird had been stabbed multiple times on purpose. Inside that castle, only 2 children were capable of doing something that cruel. Right then, his 2 brothers, the same ones who used to torment Jean, show up smiling. They say they were sad that the maid found the gift before he did. The black-haired one is named Dayton Runcandle, 9 years old, and the white-haired one is Raytona Runcandle, also 9. With heavy sarcasm, his brothers ask Jean if he's so moved by the gift that he's about to cry. Jean starts remembering his past life and how those 2 behaved. They earned a notorious reputation after becoming flag-bearer assassins. The very idea that 9-year-old boys killed an innocent bird just to mess with him makes him extremely tense. Jean doesn't answer. So Raytona asks if he thinks he's superior just because he chose the patriarch's destiny. And if he picked that sword, why is he still walking around empty-handed, not carrying any sword at all? Jean mutters something very quietly, and Rayton leans in to hear him better. When he puts his hand on Jin's shoulder, he gets ready to punch him. But Jean grabs his fist with one hand. A dark aura bursts around him, and Jean tells them they're being too loud, so they should shut up. Out of nowhere, he punches Rayton with such force and speed that the kid can't even see the blow coming. When Rayton tries to react, Jean just keeps hitting him nonstop. He says that even though he's held himself back all this time, he's not putting up with this kind of provocation anymore. Then, after landing a punch straight to his stomach, he tells them to never cross his path again. And then one of the guards arrives and asks what was going on in that place. Jean cancels his power and says that, out of nowhere, they just started fighting each other and suddenly fell to the ground. The soldier then says he's sure that's exactly what happened. Jean simply looks at him and asks if he didn't hear what he just said. The 2 started fighting each other and ended up collapsing on the floor right in front of him. The soldier, seeing the situation, says that it's just as expected. Even the youngest of the Hankendels is brutal, and he pretends to accept the explanation, saying that must be what happened. And when he moves to take the brothers to the infirmary, Jean tells him not to take them there, because they had a different destination, and asks the soldier to follow him. The 2 then walk out into the rain, and Jean begins digging a grave for the dead bird, leaving his brothers lying nearby. The soldier questions Jean, asking if he really intended to leave them there, since the storm was getting worse. Jean simply replies that they needed to understand the weight of their actions. So the soldier, loyal to the family, decides to accept Jin's decision and follows him back toward the castle. On the way, he starts to wonder if he really saw things correctly. The energy Jean released earlier wasn't aura, but it could have been mana. If that were the case, then this wasn't just a childish fight, and maybe he should report everything to the patriarch. Meanwhile, Jean watches from the window and comments to himself that it was exactly what he expected. That soldier definitely would report everything to his father, because he wasn't just any knight. He was Can. He's called Can, the guardian of the family, and since what he had seen looked like magic, there was no way he'd ignore it. But Jean wasn't worried, because that wasn't magic at all. It was spiritual power, the manifestation of his contract with Sodaret. And since the contract carried over into this life as well, thanks to it, he had escaped the blade curse again. And now that his talent had no limits, the Fool of the Hankendels no longer existed, and his entire path would be completely different. As Ken reported everything to his father, the patriarch ordered all the knights to be summoned, because he wanted to see the youngest of the Hankendels personally. So the elite knights, the Hankendel children, and all the subordinates begin gathering. Everyone was there just to witness one child, and the patriarch headed straight toward the castle for the meeting with his son. As they were moving along, Mary, one of the sisters, asked Deepu's, one of the brothers, if he knew why they were going to the castle, especially since even Luna, another sister, seemed to know what was happening. Mary says she had been busy taking down mages earlier, and Deepu's comments that it couldn't be because of the twins, since they wouldn't even be going to the castle for another year. Looking at the situation, Deepu's assumes they were probably going to see their youngest brother, Jean. Mary becomes curious. Why the youngest brother? Deepu's reminds her that Jean was special because he had chosen the Patriarch's sword during the selection. But Mary says it shouldn't be just because of that, given that the Patriarch summoned every member. As they keep discussing, Luna tells them both to be quiet because they're making too much noise and orders silence. Mary then begins thinking to herself that if the leader of the clan decided to see her brother personally, then he probably had more value than she thought. Back at Castle Dill, the nursemaid says she can't believe the Lord was coming personally to see the young master. Jean says he doesn't even know why he's coming, though in his thoughts he assumes that Kan reported the possible use of magic to his father. Since Kan is a fair and just person, he didn't outright claim Jean used magic. He simply suspected it. And now the clan leader was coming in person to see what kind of power Jean had, whether it was human aura. But Jean thinks this wasn't mere curiosity. In reality, his father wanted to evaluate this ability to see if Jean could contribute to the clan's prosperity. When the castle doors open, all the soldiers bow to the Patriarch. As soon as he arrives and receives some information, he orders the twin brothers to be brought in first. The two kneel before their father, who immediately questions them about the fight they had with Jean. He orders them to explain their mistake in the situation. But the brothers look at each other and say they made no mistake at all. They claim Jean attacked them first. On top of that, during the attack, Jean seemed to be using some unknown ability that wasn't aura but looked like magic or something similar. And since magic was taboo within the clan, they try to turn their father against Jean, arguing that he should be interrogated before he hides anything else. However, their father tells them that they need to keep certain things in their hearts and minds, and that if they keep acting this way, they'll never survive in Hankendall. Right after that, he orders them to bring Jean into his presence. As Jean walks slowly toward the hall, he begins thinking about his father, Soren Hankendall, the strongest and coldest man he has ever seen, because he wasn't just the most powerful being of his era, but a human who reached the level of a demigod. He is known as the Genesis Knight, and they say that although he was once an ordinary man, when he reached that level, he simply lost all emotions. The only thing left was his obsession with the prosperity of the clan. And for a father like that, in his past life, Jean meant nothing. But in this life, things were different. As soon as he enters the hall, Jean bows before the Patriarch. Soren then asks why Jean addressed him as Patriarch and not Father. Jean explains that more than 100 people from the clan had visited him already, including his siblings. He figured this was an official visit from the Patriarch, so he decided to act accordingly. But his father simply says he came to the castle for other reasons, and for now, Jean should call him Father. Then, the father asks Jean the same question he asked the twins. What was their mistake in that fight? Jean replies that everything was just a matter of repayment, because within the Hankendall clan, one must return everything they receive. It could be kindness or even hatred. After hearing that answer, the Patriarch orders everyone to leave the hall, keeping only the two of them inside. The other soldiers are shocked, because this meant the boy passed the Patriarch's test. The Matriarch then states that when the Patriarch gives an order, everyone must obey immediately. Mary is impressed by the situation and comments that her brother is truly remarkable, saying she might need to reconsider her opinion of him. After everyone leaves, the Patriarch says he sent them away because he wants to ask Jean a personal question. He explains that Jin's brothers told him he possesses an unknown ability that looks like magic, reminding him that magic is forbidden in the clan since those who use magic never reach the peak of swordsmanship. At that moment, he demands to know exactly what kind of power Jean has, making it clear that if it really is magic, Jean will face consequences. Jean prepares himself to answer, knowing that now that his father knows something, he can't ignore it. So he explains that he doesn't really know either, because it's neither aura nor magic. Showing the shadow flames on his hand, he asks his father if he'd like to give it a name. The Patriarch watches the power closely and is stunned, because that power is the same as the one used by the first Patriarch. Shocked, he begins to wonder if this child was destined to become the next Patriarch. His father also explains that this power belongs to Sadaret, the god of shadows. Taking the chance, Jean asks if that being could be stronger than him. The Patriarch answers that he can't say. He's never fought a god, so he doesn't know. Jean replies that such an answer is fitting coming from the most powerful man in the world. Then the Patriarch looks at his son and says that was a very good question, something significant to hear, concluding that his decision to see Jean that day was absolutely the right one. Right after that, he asks Jean how he wants to use that power, and Jean responds that he wants to use it for the good of the clan. However, the patriarch begins laughing, saying everything he said was a lie, since Jean had left his brothers out in the rain after defeating them. Because of that, he orders Jean to answer honestly. Realizing his father wouldn't fall for a fake answer, Jean admits that he would like to use that power for his own benefit. And then the patriarch looks at him, saying that now he truly likes that answer. And as he walked out, he declared that, from now on, he would be keeping an eye on the boy. The moment the patriarch left, the pressure weighing down on Jean vanished, and he felt an overwhelming sense of relief that everything was finally over. Reflecting on it, he thought that it would have already been nice to freely use his spirit, but beyond that, he knew his father was eager to see his personal growth. He never imagined things would turn out this way, because in his past life he and his father barely exchanged glances, and now his life was going to be completely different from before. Shortly after, Mary approached her younger brother to give him a present. Curious, he asked, "What is this supposed to be?" Mary said it was a special gift she wanted to give him, then handed it over to the maid, telling her to cook it and serve it, because that way he would become much stronger. Jean started questioning why she would suddenly give him something like that, and after a moment he opened the box and saw a phoenix heart. Shocked, he thought to himself that his sister was giving him something incredibly valuable, something completely unexpected for a child who was only 7 years old. He concluded that Mary definitely had a screw loose to be doing that. Meanwhile, he thought about Mary herself. Mary was the 7th flag bearer of Jean and a 6-star knight, also known as Storm Mary, and she even had another secret name, the Madwoman of the Southern region. In that instant, he understood exactly why Mary wanted to give such a rare gift to someone so young. Deep down, she wanted him to grow and become strong enough to fight her someday. If Jean ate that heart at his current age, it would greatly help in developing resistance to fire, as well as increase his growth rate. He also remembered that this item would allow a 6-star mage to summon a phoenix. Maybe, in this life, because of that, he himself might be able to accomplish that incredible feat of summoning a phoenix. While Jean was thinking, Dill arrived and said that Mary had, indeed, left him something good before leaving. Dill also told Jean to eat before it got cold. But in that moment, he sensed 2 presences nearby and asked whether his brothers had something to say. Then, his brothers began pointing out that maybe that portion was too big for him to eat by himself, and that perhaps he needed help. One of them said Dill had been cooking a giant pot, and that there was plenty more, so he probably did need help, actually. Realizing what was happening, Jean asked if they wanted a piece. The 2 immediately got excited, nodding up and down. So Jean told them that, if they really wanted a piece, they would have to do something he asked. A short time later, his brothers were out digging a hole in the ground, grumbling to themselves. They wondered what would happen if someone found out they were digging in that place. But they concluded that, in the end, if they actually got caught, the one who would suffer the most for it would be Jean. So maybe it wasn't that bad. And even with doubts, they agreed that the meal was worth it. While digging, they ended up discovering some kind of underground structure, and a stone rolled into a hidden room, revealing a condensation tube where someone was trapped. And that being had the same aura Jean emanated. When night fell, the maid nearly jumped in shock when she saw the 2 brothers covered in dirt. Jean welcomed them back, saying they were faster than he expected. Annoyed, they told Jean to shut up and hand over the soup since they had done their part. Jean said he left it right there, and when they looked at the food, they saw only 2 spoons with a tiny bit of soup. Disappointed, they said it looked more like a teaspoon, and it was way too small. But Jean reminded them that he said he would share, and he never specified how much. So, technically, he fulfilled his part of the deal. With no other choice, his brothers thanked him, though they were clearly furious. Meanwhile, Jean stepped into the rain and walked toward the spot they had been digging. He figured his brothers would do it anyway, but they actually did exactly what Jean instructed. Examining the structure, he concluded that a star spell would be enough to proceed. Then, he released the mana he had accumulated and cast a spell that shattered part of the wall, revealing a hidden door. And well, without hiding his excitement, he realized he had finally reached the secret handcandle library, a place he had never been allowed to enter in his previous life. As he approached, he remembered that his brother said he needed an activation key. And so he began to recite the phrase, which was basically, "A child of handcandle has come to console Murakan." And immediately, the door opened. This library was so important because it held a collection of the clan's secret tomes, records of the defeated handcandle bloodline spanning 1,000 years. Only the flag bearers had access to this library and its knowledge. In his past life, his older brother told him it was pointless to know about this place, since he would never become a flag bearer. But thanks to the bits of information his brother had shared, that knowledge was now incredibly useful. While exploring the area, he bumped into the condensation tube and saw the man trapped inside it. When he noticed that the figure had scales, he started questioning whether that thing was even human. As he touched the glass, he somehow managed to communicate mentally, asking what that being was doing there. But then, suddenly, he remembered the keyword, the phrase about consoling Muraken, and he wondered if the being inside the tube was actually the dragon Muraken. He had heard Muraken was defeated by the first patriarch and entered a deep slumber afterward. But now, faced with all of this, he began questioning whether any of it was actually true. Still, he told himself that this wasn't the time to think about that, and that he needed to look for the secret tomes. However, before he could dive deeper into the search, something unexpected happened. The body inside the tube moved slightly. After a long search throughout the library, Jean finally found what he was looking for. Secret tomes from every type of clan. And he started with the renowned swordsman clan, the Cuj clan. When he began reading, he realized the book was a bit difficult to understand, as it contained 3-star theories. And even though he wanted to take the book with him, he knew that stealing it would get him caught. So he decided he would copy all the important parts whenever he visited the library. After several days going back and forth to the library, on one particular day, while he was reading, he felt a presence inside the room. Shocked, he began to wonder who could possibly be inside the castle library at that hour. Then a terrifying man appeared on the other side of the door, asking who Jean was. At that moment, Jean realized it was Muraken, and he couldn't understand what the dragon was doing there, because in his previous life Muraken never managed to leave that tube. Trying to stay calm, even though he was terrified, he remembered that Muraken was known as the clan's guardian, and that if he acted like an innocent child, the dragon wouldn't do anything to him. But Muraken could hear Jin's thoughts and became furious at being called a guardian. He grew extremely irritated, asking why the handcandles treated him that way. He demanded to know how the clan dared to teach people that story. Still, as angry as he was, he couldn't take it out on a child, and he knew that. Trying to calm himself, Muraken said he woke up only because he sensed a pleasant smell. It had been a very long time since he'd felt something like that, but after seeing that it was just a child, he found it strange, because the scent was that of spiritual energy. And even though he had been asleep for 1,000 years, he knew that smell could only come from someone who had formed a contract. When Jean realized that his spiritual energy had awakened Muraken, he decided to test something. He manifested his energy in front of the dragon and asked if that was what he was talking about. He continued, explaining that his father said this power belonged to the god of shadows, Lord Sodaret. Hearing that, Muraken was completely stunned, demanding to know if this was some kind of joke, since the fated contractor of 1,000 years was nothing more than a little kid. Having no choice, given that the chosen one was a child, Muraken said there was an ancient promise between him and Sodaret. That promise forced him to assist the contractor of the god of shadows, and unfortunately, that person was Jean. He added that he would explain the details later, because the whole situation had left him extremely confused and a bit dizzy. And also, since Jean was still a child, Muraken figured he would have trouble understanding everything at once if he explained it immediately. But before ending the conversation, he decided to introduce himself properly, declaring that he was Muraka, the representative of Sodaret, the last descendant of the first beings of Shadow, and that, according to the promise made 1,000 years ago, from this day on he would remain by Jin's side. Realizing he now had an actual shadow dragon standing with him, Jean also decided to introduce himself formally, stating that he was Jean Handcandle, the 13th and youngest son of the Handcandles. And with that, he greeted the dragon by placing his hand on Muraken's claw, sealing the start of their partnership. And well, at that moment we start learning more details about Muraka and why he was so important. The Storm Castle was originally named after him, and in the past, Muraka had been a powerful ruler who dominated the region for many years. However, years ago, he was defeated by the first patriarch of the Handcandles, Timar Handcandle. After that defeat, he fell into a deep sleep, but despite having fought each other, they were not enemies. In truth, the dragon had been a friend of the first patriarch. Usually, a contractor of a god is always accompanied by a guardian dragon, but Sodaret's dragon had always been a mystery. And now everything made sense, because in reality Sodaret's dragon had been asleep all along, and thanks to Muraka awakening, Jean had essentially gained a dragon of his own. After some time, he returned to the guardian carrying some snacks, thinking to himself that now that Muraka was with him, he should clear up every question he had about both Muraka and Sodaret. After a few months of Muraka's awakening, Jean kept visiting the library in secret and began asking directly about the battle against the first patriarch and why they fought. But the dragon said that it had been 1,000 years already, and he didn't remember. And well, since they had known each other for months now, Jean at least realized that Muraka was completely obsessed with strawberry pie. Muraka then asked what Jean was doing there, and Jean explained that he was transcribing the texts, copying everything instead of taking the secret tomes with him. Because if he removed any of the books, there was a good chance someone would eventually discover he had been going there. This made Muraka curious. He asked if Jean actually understood any of it, and Jean admitted he understood about 30% of the content. The dragon reassured him, saying he was doing extremely well for his age, since most others of his generation wouldn't even be able to comprehend what he was reading. But Jean replied that this was normal for him, because he belonged to the Handcandle clan, and that was the minimum expected from him. In the Handcandle family, he had 12 older siblings, along with his father and mother, and since his goal was to surpass all of them, he needed to work far harder than everyone else. He took the chance to ask if the first patriarch would have understood that book. Muraka said that if Timar, the first patriarch, had been the same age as Jean, he wouldn't have understood a single sentence in that book. But he also made it very clear that theory was different from real combat, because Timar fought incredibly well, even without reading books like that. Muraka said that Jean certainly had talent, but not at the same level as Timar. And Jean became totally discouraged, thinking to himself that he really would never be able to reach the first patriarch. But Muraka paused, because the kid wasn't just Sodaret's contractor. He also had above-average intelligence for even being able to understand that kind of reading. So he advised Jean to train non-stop, but without rushing, because if he persisted, he could reach, and maybe even surpass, Timar. Jean then looked at Muraka and asked if he really believed that. And Muraka said of course he did, and asked if Jean knew Sodaret's nickname. Sodaret's nickname was Infinite, and he explained that since Sodaret's power had no limits, the same applied to his contractor. Then the dragon told Jean to stop feeling discouraged, and said he would teach him a new ability to lift his spirits. And well, this ability Muraka was going to teach Jean was known as spiritual release. Jean became curious and asked, what exactly is that power? Muraka explained that the skill was essential for any user of spiritual energy, and that it was basically the fundamental principle of spiritual control, but at the same time something extremely dangerous if used without training. So Jean, still curious, asked what the first step was, and then Muraka starts explaining that Jean needed to learn mana release before anything else. This leaves Jean confused, because he had already performed that kind of technique in his previous life. But Muraka explains that spiritual release has to be connected to mana transfer release as well, and he needed to master both. Muraka also says that this training could take anywhere from 2 to 3 years. Jean thinks to himself that this is way too long, and Muraka explains that Jean needed to learn the basics before he could move on to more specific skills. However, Jean uses mana release right away, showing it to Muraka and asking if they could already move on to the next stage. Muraka is shocked and asks how Jean managed to do that, but Jean simply replies that he already knew how to do it before. Muraka, now curious, then asks if by any chance he is also able to use mana transfer, and Jean shows that yes, he can. And Muraka is completely stunned by this, since only the brightest prodigies can pull that off. Recognizing the kid's talent, Muraka finally decides to teach him spiritual release. Muraka then explains that all spiritual power comes from the shadows, and that every shadow in the world exists through Sodaret's will. And he also states that Sodaret is the absolute master of shadows. And, as his contractor, the boy could also become the master of every shadow in the world. To demonstrate this, Muraka simply lets darkness fill the entire room, creating trails of shadows everywhere. And Jean is absolutely amazed by this kind of spiritual release power. Meanwhile, somewhere else, Miss Luna is talking with a knight, and they inform her that the release has been activated and the mission will be complete once they clear 5 areas. Luna says that 4 months will probably be enough for that mission, and then she orders the knights to rest. Right after that, she asks the knight what a 9-year-old kid would normally like. And after 6 months since Jin's meeting with Muraka, the Thonin twins turn 10 years old, and they leave the Storm Castle. And following that farewell, we see Dilly giving a cake to Jean to celebrate his 9th birthday. Jean gets really happy, since a bunch of servants were gathered there, and he even asks if they could share the cake with him. And, right in the middle of that celebration, Khan shows up to talk to Jean, apologizing for interrupting. When Jean asks why Khan came, Khan says that Luna came to visit him. Jean is extremely surprised because Luna is the first knight of the Run Candle and a 9-star knight. On top of that, even though she is the oldest among the siblings, she never involved herself directly in the clan's disputes. Luna, also known as the White Whale, abandoned her position as successor to the matriarch and distanced herself from the clan's internal wars. And because of that attitude, she never showed much interest in her siblings, to the point where she seemed more like a stranger than a member of Jin's family. In his previous life, There had been a huge distance between them, and because of all that, he grew very suspicious about Luna's unexpected visit. So, right after that, Luna, Jin's oldest sister, shows up at Storm Castle out of nowhere, and that immediately makes Jin wonder if it had something to do with the clan or if, by any chance, she had found out about him in the secret library. But even with those thoughts in mind, he still goes over and greets her, and she looks him over and comments that he's grown a lot. Jin, feeling a little embarrassed, says that if he had known she was coming, he would have dressed better. Luna then replies that he was still adorable either way, and asks if she really needed to send notice just because she wanted to visit her little brother. And of course, Jin is completely caught off guard by that kind of behavior, and she notices that he seems a bit off and asks if, by any chance, he's feeling sick. Jin says that it's not that, and explains that he's just nervous because it's the first time he's ever seen her up close. Luna is surprised by that answer, and that's when it's revealed to us that in the Runcandle family, siblings usually compete against each other, even going as far as destroying one another to take each other's place. And she thinks to herself that maybe Jin assumes her visit is to spy on him. That frustrates her, and feeling bad, she says that maybe she was being insensitive, and remembers that even though he's still very young, he's still a Runcandle. So she apologizes and says she wants to talk to him privately. She then asks Baba and the Guardians to leave the room, and Jin, even though he's surprised, accepts her request since he isn't sensing any threat from her. And once the two of them are alone, Luna reveals that her sudden visit actually had a reason. She explains that after their father's unexpected visit to the castle, all of the siblings now have their eyes on Jin. And that basically means that once he leaves Storm Castle, he will be seen as a threat at all times, and everyone will be spying on him. Luna says she doesn't want to see him caught up in the family's internal fights, and even less see him lose his freedom and happiness because of that cruelty. So she goes on, saying she doesn't want to see him hurt by the rotten customs of the Runcandle. This shocks Jin, and he even wonders if that's why she gave up becoming the next matriarch. And that makes him question why, in his previous life, she never said anything like that about their siblings, maybe because he wasn't important enough, or because no one saw him as a threat back then. Even so, he thanks her for her words, but says that he's still going to keep fighting. Luna even tries to convince him that she's being sincere and not saying any of this because she thinks he might become a threat to her in the future. So Jin reveals that he has already faced an assassination attempt, and Luna is shocked by that, asking if it happened inside Storm Castle. Her aura instantly becomes frightening, and she demands to know who tried to kill Jin. Jin says he doesn't know either, but thanks her, because now he realizes that not all of his siblings hate him. And in that moment, Luna says she feels sorry that he's already being pulled into the internal war, and she pulls him into a hug, calling him her little brother. Jin finds it strange seeing Luna act like that, but she quickly stops and says she shouldn't be talking about such heavy things on such a special day. Jin then wonders what she means by that, and she says she already knew it was his birthday, and that's exactly why she came to visit him. And then she gives him a present, a blue gemstone pendant necklace, and when Jin asks what it is, she tells him to turn around, and explains that if he ever finds himself in a hopeless situation, all he has to do is crush that blue gem, and no matter where he is, she will run to help him. And she also makes him promise to always keep the necklace on him, then wishes him a happy birthday again, and the two of them enjoy that moment together as siblings. They eat cake together, and after the party, Luna leaves, and Jin heads over to Maraka. Maraka, extremely curious, immediately asks what that necklace is, and Jin says it was a gift from his sister. After examining the jewel up close, Maraka says it's extremely rare, explaining that it's an artifact from one of the rarest demonic beasts in existence, and that 1,000 years ago many people died trying to obtain that item. Jin asks if it's really worth that much, and Maraka says yes. That necklace could help a lot. For example, letting people below 5 stars strengthen their magic, and even assist in summoning. Jin is surprised by Maraka's knowledge, and Maraka explains that he lived during that era, so he knows that story very well. Then Maraka concludes that whoever gave Jin that necklace clearly has a powerful aura, and whoever it is, they're extremely strong. So Jin tells him it was his sister, surprised by Maraka's reaction, and Maraka casually asks if she also noticed his presence. That makes Jin a bit nervous, worried that she might report it to the clan, but Maraka tells him to think about it. It wouldn't make any sense for someone to expose a person they just gave such a precious gift to. Then we cut to outside, where Luna is leaving, and she really is thinking about the strange energy she felt inside the castle. But she also reflects that, if Jin knows anything about that power, he probably won't say anything to her. And well, she thinks that no matter what he does or what he becomes, she'll always be by his side. And Jin starts reflecting that even though his time in the castle was incredibly boring, in the end it was worth it because he gained so much. His father's recognition and attention, Merlin's phoenix heart, a new bond with Luna, and even his meeting with Muraka, the Black Dragon. Things he never could have dreamed of in his previous life. Then, after some time, Jean finally turns 10 years old, and he continues his training as preparation to head to the main house. And during that period, he ends up facing Khan, the royal guardian of the Runcandle family, and he actually does pretty well. Khan is genuinely impressed with Jin's abilities, even acknowledging that Jean would be the ideal person for the patriarch to keep an eye on. He even admits that he's usually the one who evaluates others during training, but with Jean, it felt more like Khan was the one being tested. So after that fight, Khan tries talking to Jean, asking if there was anything wrong with his training, but he also says that it was an honor to have been his mentor during that entire period. Knowing that Jin's departure from the castle is getting close, he promises to give him the best training possible until then. And Jean says he's really counting on that kind of training. Then we move to a scene where Jean sticks his finger into a fireplace flame, and at that moment he realizes he's immune to fire. His nanny gets worried and asks if he burned himself, but Jean says that, to him, it felt like touching warm water. She's incredibly surprised and happy to see that Merlin's gift is actually taking effect in Jean, since it was the first time she had ever seen the Phoenix Heart's benefits in action. Jean comments that it's also his first time experiencing something like that, and he figures he's already absorbed about half of that power and would probably finish absorbing it in a few years. Then Jill and his nanny announce that they will be leaving early at dawn, and if he needs anything, he can just call for her. Seeing the piles of books on his bed, she asks if he'd like her to pack them for the trip, and Jean says yes. Then she also mentions that she'll be making a dessert pie for that night's dinner, which reminds Jean of something. He leaves the room, saying he'll be right back. Jean heads to the library entrance to inform Muraka that they'll be departing the next morning. Muraka then says he would never forget that. And of course he remembers. After all, he's been waiting for this for centuries. Jean then asks how Muraka plans to follow him, and Muraka answers with absolute confidence. He tells Jean not to worry, because even though he's weakened, he's still the legendary Black Dragon, and he'll make sure he isn't discovered. Jean becomes curious when Muraka emphasizes that he's weakened, and Muraka explains that he slept for 1,000 years, and because of that, he's not in his strongest form. Jean asks if he can ever recover 100% of his power, and Muraka says yes, but that depends entirely on Jin's rate of growth. Since Muraka is his guardian dragon, the stronger Jean becomes, the stronger Muraka will be. That's why he encourages Jean to become the greatest magic swordsman ever, surpassing even Timar. This reminds Jean of something he heard in his past life. Basically that the Runcandles were originally magic swordsmen, and the first patriarch was the strongest among them, a secret almost no one knew. Muraka then explains that magic was banned from the family after a treaty made 1,000 years ago, and that even though he was proclaimed the family's guardian, he knew his presence would cause discomfort if he appeared now. Even though everyone once revered him, things would be very different these days. Jean then asks what they should do about the empty tunnel where Muraka lives, since it could be discovered now. Muraka says he'll use draconic magic to create a clone of himself, and even though maintaining that clone for long would be difficult because he's weakened, he'll do everything he can until Jean becomes stronger, and that way, both of them will grow stronger together. Jean thanks him and gives Muraka a gift, a pie he really likes, along with some wine he secretly took from his nanny. He tells Muraka not to overdo it, and Muraka says he's delighted that Jean was the one who awakened him. Then he asks Jean to introduce him to his nanny someday, and Jean says he'll think about it. The next day, Dilly, Jin's nanny, told him that once he returned home, his routine would be completely different. He wouldn't have the same freedom he had back at the castle, and his life was about to get a whole lot more demanding. So Jean told her not to worry, because he was ready to work hard. Dilly then said she would push herself for his sake too. And right at that moment, Knight Jeromeo appeared, introducing himself and saying he was the one who would take Jean to the Garden of Swords, where the main Runcandle residence was located. Jean thanked him, and they left together on October 30th, 1790. While on the road, they realized that the heavy snowfall might interfere with the teleportation spell, and that could force them to stop in a nearby village. But during the trip, something suddenly slammed into the carriage, and it was nothing less than an ambush. They were forced to stop on the spot. Dilly tried to calm Jean down, telling him that the ones protecting them were Jeromeo and Holtz, both 7-star knights. And Dilly, who was also very strong, was there too. She emphasized that among the enemies, there were about 20 warriors and mages, and there was also a chance that archers were hiding somewhere. But, even so, no one there would ever be stronger than a 7-star knight, since that region was well known for them. But Jean noticed something off, and he told her they needed to get out of the carriage immediately. He reminded her that a true run-candle knight would never leave a member of the family's bloodline alone. And that could only mean two things. Either they were fake knights, or they were traitors. Jean also suspected there might be some kind of trap or device planted inside the carriage, which was why they had to escape quickly. And well, she was shocked, but she instantly understood the seriousness of the situation and, as a loyal servant of the Run-Candle family, she declared she would protect Jean with her own life. So she activated her weapons, which were basically Wolverine claws, and asked him to forgive her if she had to be a bit rough. Then she grabbed Jean and leaped out of the carriage. While running, she emphasized that she would probably be punished once they reached the main estate, but he told her it wasn't the time to worry about punishment, and that they needed to find the two knights first to confirm his suspicions. And Jean remembered that if he truly was the primary target, the perfect moment for the attack would be exactly when they stepped out of the carriage. But all that silence as they were fleeing felt incredibly strange. And just as Dilly understood what Jean meant, the red-haired man appeared, shouting for them to hurry up and find Jean Run-Candle. He ordered a team called Group 3 to block the path on the left. When Jean saw the emblems on those enemies, a leaf and a black beast, he recognized them as the Digital Magic Clan and the Black King mercenaries. And then, one of them spotted Jean and confirmed he was still alive. The red-haired man then introduced himself as the vice captain of the 3rd Squad of the Black King mercenaries, claiming he had come to rescue Jean at his family's request. Now that the enemies were clearly exposed as imposters, Jean realized it wasn't an internal betrayal but a group of fake knights. And that if they were truly 7-star knights, they wouldn't have been defeated so easily. With the enemies now subdued, Dilly demanded to know who they really were. One of them said he would never reveal anything to a little Run-Candle dog. Dilly then asked Jean what he wanted to do with them, and Jean simply ordered her to kill one of them, and to rip the arm off the other and bring it to him. So Dilly obeyed her master's command, and when the second man tried resisting, she tore off both his arms, stomped on his chest, and dragged him over to Jean. Then Jean stated that whoever sent them had underestimated their enemies way too much, because if they wanted to kill a Run-Candle heir, they should have brought at least 1 or 3 8-star knights. The man then said that this was supposed to be more of a warning. The era of the Run-Candles was about to end soon, and Jean, coldly, said he agreed. He also wanted the end of the Run-Candle era, but only so he could begin his own, the era of Jean Run-Candle. And then his enemy, furious, praised the great Zipful. Jean reflected that the Zipfuls were a magic clan that ruled half the world and, unlike the Run-Candles, who pursued the pinnacle of swordsmanship, they sought the pinnacle of magic. And 1,000 years ago, after the death of the first Run-Candle patriarch, the Zipful launched a humiliating pact that banned magic from the Run-Candle clan. Because of that, the Zipfuls became the Run-Candle's historic enemies, and Jean pointed out that everything finally made sense now. Only a follower of the Zipfuls would try something as bold as attempting to kill a Run-Candle heir. So, telling Dilia to get rid of the man, he said it wasn't worth the effort to interrogate him. She followed her young master's command, and Jean thought to himself that, although strikes from the Zipfuls against the Run-Candles were common, this particular attack felt different. And that made him suspect that maybe there was another traitor involved. Someone with such a special ability that they could fool a 7-star knight. After carrying out every order, Dilia gave a brief report, and Jean used that moment to approach the mercenary vice-captain to thank him for helping create the distraction that allowed him to escape. He promised that once he returned, he would report everything to the clan, and they would reward the mercenary handsomely for it. The vice leader, still shocked, said he'd do his best, but he couldn't help wondering what kind of kid Jean even was. After all, even though he was just a 10-year-old boy, visiting the castle for the first time, Jean already carried himself with confidence, authority, and a genuine presence fitting for a Run-Candle heir. And maybe, in the end, his dream of ushering in the era of Jean Run-Candle wasn't just a child's fantasy. So Jean simply ordered all the soldiers to stay alert until they reached the gate. No messing around. That made some of the soldiers irritated, and Dilia glanced at them and told them they could go ahead and move out. Feeling a bit embarrassed, the soldiers agreed and continued. Some even wondered if it was a problem to leave those imposters behind. But Jean only replied that it was fine, because dead or alive, they would serve as an example to any future traitors. He also praised Dilia for her good work, and she informed him that if they kept walking for 2 hours, they would reach a village. Jean even said it would be better for them to wait there until the snowstorm passed. After that, he reassured Dilia, telling her not to blame herself for everything that happened during the trip. After all, not even Khan, who was a 9-star knight, noticed that trap. So it would be even harder for a 7-star warrior like her to catch it. He also said it wasn't a problem that she explained the rules of an escort, because she wasn't a guardian knight. Even so, Dilia apologized to him again. And that made Jean think to himself that she was still exactly the same as before. He remembered that, in his past life, Delia had always been just a nanny, and because he had no talent, she ended up being completely underestimated by the clan. And on the day he was expelled from the Runcandle family, she was thrown out as well. And even then, in the middle of all that, she still apologized for not serving him well enough. He didn't want to be too harsh with her, but now things were different. Delia needed to mature. And then Delia once again said she accepted whatever punishment the young master decided. But Jean, at that moment, shouted for her not to blame herself, and that it was an order. Because even though she was his nanny, she was also his only guardian knight right then. And if she kept focusing on tiny mistakes, she would never be able to accomplish her mission in the future. After hearing those words, Delia promised she would work hard to improve and correct this failure. And with that, Delia even realized that Jean genuinely cared about her. She felt encouraged by that, and Jean felt relieved seeing her pull herself out of that guilty mindset. When they arrived at the inn, Jean began thinking again about those fake guardians and how, if his suspicions were right, there was a good chance someone else was involved. He immediately thought of the shapeshifter Bulvard Gaston, and, well, transformation magic was something that belonged to dragon magic, and even then, only a few dragons could transform perfectly. Bulvard was the only one who could achieve a flawless transformation and used that ability to commit countless crimes. That made Jean uneasy, because, in his past life, Bulvard was only captured when Jean was 20. And more importantly, it was Vermont's special forces who captured him. And if Jean managed to convince Bulvard to switch sides, he could be incredibly useful. But at the same time, there was no reason to trust someone who had already tried to kill him. So, before Bulvard committed any serious crime, Jean needed to figure out whether something had changed in this new timeline. And while he was thinking about that, Delia told him she would wait outside in case he needed anything. But before she even stepped out, Jean had already knocked out cold and fallen asleep. Then out of nowhere, a cat started meowing at the window, and this cat was basically walking on two legs. He remembered right away that Muraka said he would shape-shift to keep an eye on him. So, noticing that the cat looked way more like a person, he asked if Muraka had turned into that cat. He opened the window and let the cat inside. Jean said he didn't expect Muraka to take that form and admitted he thought he would transform into a knight or a servant. But Muraka reverted to his real shape and explained that if he had done that, the knights would have noticed immediately. And while he was talking, he suddenly tripped and smashed his face right into the edge of the window. Delia rushed in, startled, and the moment she saw a stranger next to Jean, she didn't hesitate. She activated her claws and lunged straight at Muraka. She demanded to know who he was and what he was doing there. And while Jean tried to stop her, Muraka suddenly recognized Delia's name, remembering those strawberry tarts. And so he and his strawberry tart finally met face to face. Delia immediately made a disgusted expression, completely confused. And Jean, annoyed, said everything had gotten totally out of control. His guardian was basically flirting with his nanny right in front of him. So he introduced Muraka as the Black Guardian of the Runcandle clan. And Muraka clearly already knew who Delia was, considering he called her his strawberry tart. Not knowing how to react, Delia apologized for being so aggressive. But Muraka told her not to worry, since he had already forgiven her. When she asked why he called her that, he replied that it was because she made the best strawberry tarts. And at that moment, Delia finally understood why Jean asked for that tart every single day. With Delia still extremely confused, Jean asked her to sit so he could explain what was going on. Then he told her everything. The magic contract, the bond with the dragon, the secret that couldn't be revealed to the clan. She was incredibly happy for her young master. And Jean added that now she was his partner in crime, and the secret needed to be protected no matter what. She agreed and promised she would be careful. Muraka then tried to break the tension, saying there was no need to be so dramatic. And Delia asked if the earlier noise came from his transformation. But he got embarrassed and admitted that he had actually just tripped and hit his head. So Delia, suspicious of that answer, whispered to Jean, asking if they could really trust that dragon. Jean simply replied that they probably could. With that, they continued their journey and arrived at the transfer portal of the Mythal Kingdom. They thanked the mercenaries for the support. They said the reward would be arranged as soon as they arrived at the Runcandle Castle. The mercenary leader also said it had been a great experience for them, and that he was excited to see what the future held for that promising young Runcandle. Then the vice leader took the chance to ask Delia a question directly. He wondered why someone as skilled as she was would leave the Mech-Holland clan to become the nanny of that young Runcandle. Delia simply answered that there wasn't a big reason worth mentioning. Hearing that, the mercenary said he understood and apologized for the rudeness. And after all that talk, they reached the portal, where the group's identification was requested. Delia then presented a sword bearing the Runcandle emblem and asked for transport to Carlin. One of the attendants, realizing she was a servant of the Runcandle clan, said it was an honor to meet her. They were quickly guided to their prestigious seats and informed that, after waiting 2 hours, the trip would be almost instantaneous. So when Gilly and Jean sat down on the couch, Gilly looked a little worried about the situation. She was afraid that Muraka's secret, right there inside the clan, might end up being exposed, and, because of that, Jean could get in serious trouble. Jean asked if she was talking about the clan's forbidden magic, and she said yes, explaining that this was one of the few topics the clan would never forgive. But Jean said everything was fine, that he would be careful, and that he would make sure to keep that secret hidden. And at that moment, someone walked up to them. Jean immediately noticed the golden emblem on the person's clothing and recognized that it was someone from the Zippel family. The Zippel clan member sat right in front of them, and Jean said that face looked familiar. Then the boy sat down and commented that he wasn't surprised Jean didn't want to go to Hofstra, but to think he would find those pests here. Still, Jean remained completely calm, while Gilly was furious. Then Muraka, pretending to be just an ordinary cat, walked up to the Zippel boy. But when he tried to pet it, the cat slapped his hand. And when the guards reacted, the boy told them to relax, saying it was a normal reaction from an animal, and that starting a fight over something like that would be foolish, especially in front of a Runcandle. After testing them like that, he formally introduced himself to Jean as Baradin and apologized for the childish behavior earlier. In that moment, Jean recognized the prodigy mage who, in his past life, had been highly qualified to become one of the future patriarchs of his family. Jean was surprised to meet him so early in this life, since in the previous one he had only ever seen him from a distance. So Jean said he was also curious to know what kind of person he was, and he was glad to see that Baradin wasn't just some idiot. When Baradin asked what he meant by that, Jean explained that if someone reacted violently just because of that little prank, they might end up traveling without their bodyguards and missing 2 fingers as punishment. Baradin then said Jean was interesting, but Jean made it clear he wasn't joking. The Zippel boy said everything was fine, but gave him a warning. If Jean ever ran into another member of the Zippel family, he should avoid acting impulsively, or he might bring major trouble to his own clan. Jean replied that that was the real joke, since there was no way the clan leaders would move their entire influence just because of a childish scuffle. Baradin agreed, saying that if he really lost his fingers, the most he would get in compensation would be a few gold coins. Then he said he had learned something valuable from Jean and promised to repay him one day. But Jean told him he preferred to receive that payment right away. The payment would be Baradin staying quiet until the teleportation began. Baradin was impressed by Jin's attitude but agreed. He even thought to himself that, if not for the rivalry between their clans, he would actually love to be friends with that guy. But he also knew Jean could become his greatest rival in the future, and that made his bodyguard tell him to behave a little better. Meanwhile, Jean was surprised by his behavior and wondered if something was wrong with that Zippel kid, even thinking that none of the Zippels seemed normal. Then the system announced that the teleport was about to begin and warned that it could cause dizziness or fainting. Before the teleport activated, Baradin said he had fun and hoped to meet Jean again someday. But Jean simply replied that he hoped to never see him again in his life. When they arrived at their destination, Jean was greeted by a butler named Petro. He welcomed Jean to the main Runcandle residence, and at that moment Jean could already see the Garden of Swords. It was explained that the members of the clan who could leave their swords there were those who had achieved great accomplishments. In his past life, Jean wanted that more than anything, but he had been weak, without talent, without leadership, and not even smart. That made him reflect on how foolish he was to think that effort alone would ever be enough. But now, in this new life, Jean promised himself that living in that place he once hated would be worth it. Then he continued on to meet his father, his siblings, and his mother, known as the Black Rose Panther, a woman feared and respected by all. And well, when he greets her, his father immediately asks what kind of cat that was with him, and when he wonders if Jean found it on the street, Jean simply answers that he adopted it. Siren is surprised by that response, because Jean said adopted instead of picked up, and a Runcandle should always declare when they've claimed something. It reinforced the clan's values. Jin's mother then asks what the cat's name is, and he answers that his name is Nabi Runcandle. One of his brothers gets offended, saying that, even though he understood his brother was still young, giving the family name to a stray was unacceptable. So the brother questions Gilly, asking how she allowed him to name the cat like that. Gilly just apologizes, but Jin's father tells his son to be quiet and asks Jean why he gave the family name to the cat. Jean explains that, even though it was just an animal, he wanted to take full responsibility for it, and since it was the first life he ever adopted, he felt the name should carry real weight. His father finds Jin's reasoning interesting and asks if he understands the true weight their family name carries. Jin confirms that he does, stating that if anyone ever harmed Nabi, he himself would deal with the consequences. So his father comments that Jin seems to have a talent for making enemies, since his siblings were already furious with his attitude. Jin says he really does have that talent, but he has another one too, the talent to get rid of those enemies. Then his father smiles and mentions that his siblings were probably holding themselves back from killing the youngest run candle. After spending a long time in the main house, the story jumps forward 4 years. Jin is now 14 years old, still living at the main house. And basically, he had already reached the level of a 2-star knight, and among the cadets, he was the one with the most potential. One of the instructors says that training was over for the day and praises Jin for his excellent performance. Jin gets frustrated when he hears they would only train again the next day, but the instructor reminds him that his training with Lady Luna was scheduled for that day. Remembering that, Jin decides to grab a quick snack first. His trainer asks if he was going to have dinner with the cadets again and says that Madame Rosa seemed disappointed. Jin answers that he prefers it that way because he didn't want to be a part of the silent wars happening between him and his siblings during family meals. His trainer understands and says he'll let her know. Meanwhile, a knight named Balop arrives with Jin's food. Balop was a 13-year-old commoner and was already close to being disqualified as a cadet due to his low performance in training. Jin asks if the food was good, and Balop answers yes, thanking him for being able to eat meat every day thanks to the Run Candle clan. And, of course, thanks to Jin, who shared his meal with him. So Jin tells him to stop repeating that, because he had said the exact same thing the day before. Taking the chance, Jin is honest with Balop. He advises him to be more direct when speaking, because people despised him for rambling too much. He should improve his posture and take pride in being one of the Run Candle Knights. But Balop responds that, because of his low grades and being only a 1-star, he feels like he doesn't deserve that right. Jin says that the fact that he even entered as a Run Candle cadet was already a major achievement, and that even as a low-ranked trainee, he was still more capable than many elite children out in the world. Jin thinks to himself that it wasn't surprising Balop's clan kicked him out, since he was far too gentle. How did someone that pure end up in the Hiram clan, the clan of swordsmen, and become a ruthless assassin in his past life? Jin even remembered the exact moment when Balop transformed into an unmerciful killer of the Imperial nation, and he felt shocked and sad discovering that Balop took his own life in that past life. Now Jin had a clear goal. He would not let Balop be disqualified again, because one ruined life for such a good person was more than enough. So Jin starts thinking about his own progress. He had 2 stars in spiritual energy, 4 stars in mana, and 2 stars in swordsmanship. Everything was moving steadily, and he believed he would reach 3 stars in swordsmanship in just 2 years. But before any of that, he needed to meet with Luna. And when he sees her, she says that today's training would be the same as yesterday's, but she reminds Jin that he should treat every session as if it were the very first. Jin says he understands, so she guides him to use the mind's eye to observe, explaining that, for someone who uses a sword, that kind of training was more essential than anything else. Telling him to keep his eyes closed, Jin thinks to himself that the mind's eye was something knights with 7 stars or more could achieve. However, his sister believed he could do it now. Even though he had only 2 stars, he notices she wasn't using aura to practice the drill. And, well, using aura would have been the normal thing, which leaves Jin a bit confused. Still, he decides to trust her, since he believed there was a purpose behind everything she did. And, with time, he would probably understand. At the end of the training, Luna praises Jin and says that he did an excellent job. She states that, even though she already expected a great performance from him, Jin still managed to exceed her expectations. She praises his posture and his focus during training, saying those were rare qualities for a 2-star knight. And with that, she says she hopes Jin continues to grow. Back at the training grounds, the cadets were extremely tense. That day was very important, because the score they would get in combat was crucial for their final evaluation. And if they performed well, it would be a strong sign that they become guardian knights. That's exactly why they were so nervous. For Jin, however, that day was even more important. Madame Rosa had told him that, if he managed to defeat all 10 cadets, he'd earn access to intermediate training the following year. And that alone was huge motivation for him. When he looks to his side, he notices that Balop was extremely insecure, as usual. Jin then tells him that it wasn't anything serious and assures him he wouldn't be expelled. Still, he found it strange how insecure Balop always looked. The instructor explains that the combat would be divided into 3 rounds, switching partners each time. On top of that, the 10 strongest cadets would face Jin directly. When the training begins, Jean notices that all the cadets had real sword talent, and that's why they deserve to be there. After a short round of duels, the 10 strongest are gathered. When they go to face Jean, he defeats all of them with ease. Remembering that his siblings' record was only 8, he comments that if he beat 2 more, he would surpass them. But he knew he wasn't done yet, because one specific opponent still remained. A guardian in training named Mezel Imilcano begins walking toward Jean. He recognizes her as a very promising knight, someone almost guaranteed to become a guardian once she finished her training. She says she would love to defeat him right there, and Jean comments that he was looking forward to it. As soon as the fight starts, Jean notices that Mezel was stronger than before. But, despite her improvement, he believed he could still beat her. The real issue was that, after her, he'd still have to fight 8 more. That's exactly why he needed to finish the fight quickly and without wasting too much energy. But Mezel realizes Jean was only using simple attacks, something very unusual for him. So she starts to suspect he wasn't fighting seriously, on purpose, and she couldn't understand why. That makes her wonder if he was underestimating her. Just thinking about it makes her furious, and she charges forward at Jean. Even so, Jean defends himself with complete ease. Seeing that, Mezel tries a decisive aerial strike, but Jean simply breaks her sword. That leaves her stunned, unable to understand how he managed to do that. Then he places his blade against her neck and compliments her swordsmanship. He says it was a good fight, but that she would need a new sword. And that's when Mezel begins reflecting on what Jean had just done. During their multiple sword clashes, he always struck the same exact spot, weakening her blade little by little, and that makes her realize that the difference between them wasn't strength or endurance, but precision and persistence. It impresses her, but she refuses to stand still while he defeats everyone, promising that next time would be different. As Jean continues fighting the other cadets, he thinks that his plan worked perfectly, because defeating all 10 cadets at once in a direct confrontation would have been impossible. So, when he beat Mezel so easily, everyone else became terrified of him. And in the final match against the remaining cadets, he defeats all of them as well, and the instructor praises him. He also informs Jean that he will have access to intermediate training at the beginning of next year, and Jean thanks him and asks that he take good care of him until then. And when the instructor mentions that lunchtime was close, Jean asks how much time he had left, and after being told he still had 10 minutes, he says he wanted to fight one more person. When the instructor asks who that person would be, Jean suddenly shouts Balop's name. Balop gets startled by it, and Jean says he wants to fight him, declaring that this is the only way he'll learn how to survive in the Runcandle household. Then he orders him to go to the arena, saying he's going to crush him like a piece of trash. Balop, confused, ends up walking into the arena, but he keeps trying to understand why Jean wanted to face him, even wondering if it was because he was weak or if this was supposed to be some kind of test. And while he was getting lost in those thoughts, Jean simply charges forward, while Balop is still overwhelmed by everything happening. And even after taking on 10 opponents in a row, Jean was still moving quickly, fighting Balop with a ton of energy. And in the middle of the exchange, Jean ends up flicking stones into Balop's eyes, leaving him temporarily blind, then follows it up with a sweep that knocks him down. So, hitting the ground, bruised and completely vulnerable, Balop starts to wonder why the young master was doing this to him. And Jean, staring down at him with a cold look, asks if he really thought this was just some simple duel, because Jean wanted a real fight. And in the middle of all those matches with the cadets, Jean says that if he wanted to fight for real in an actual battle, he could kill Balop right there, ordering him to stand up and keep going, and adding that he would show mercy only once. Balop starts getting back on his feet, but stress is already starting to boil inside him. So he activates his aura, shocking everyone around with that kind of power, and the council table starts getting worried, quickly asking the instructor to stop the fight, afraid that the young master might actually be in danger. But Jean cuts them off and orders everyone there to keep what they saw a secret, and the instructor agrees, while Balop asks Jean if that really was his master's wish, and Jean answers that it was, saying that if Balop knows how to use aura, then he shouldn't hold back. Then Balop tells him that Jean made a mistake, because if he wanted to face him at full strength, he should have done that before fighting 10 cadets in a row, and rushing at Jean with fury, he shatters Jin's sword clean in half, and Jean thinks to himself that he never expected that much strength from him. And even though he knew Balop had talent, he always studied the patterns of his opponents. But he never imagined Balop already had full control over aura, and that makes Jean realize Balop probably always lost by just a small margin. So even with his sword broken, Jean continues the fight, and during one of his attacks, he ends up hitting Balop's hand with what was left of the blade, and taking advantage of the pain as an opening, he grabs Balop from behind and locks in a chokehold. Then Jean releases the chokehold and stands up, making Bellop question why he stopped the attack when he had made it clear he wanted to fight until the end, which makes him wonder if Jean just enjoyed playing around with people, but Jean says he didn't. He even reflects that acting this way hurt far more than it looked, and then Bellop asks what Jean even knew about him to treat him like that, and Jean admits that even though he didn't know everything about him, he knew one important thing. Only someone strong can afford to be gentle, and even though Bellop was weaker than Jean, he was still kinder than him. And that was something Jean admired about Bellop. But in this cruel world, kindness alone isn't enough, which is why he hopes Bellop becomes strong enough to protect that part of himself. And Jean apologizes for being so harsh on him, while Bellop starts to cry. Then the maids arrive with lunch and get confused when they hear the training still wasn't over. And when they ask if they should come back later, Jean says they can go ahead and serve the food, that it was fine. And hearing that, Bellop says he won't have his meal brought to him today, that he'll go get it himself. And Jean gets happy with that answer, saying he'll take the chance to grab his portion too. Meanwhile, Khan goes to the Patriarch to report everything that happened, and the Patriarch smiles, saying he understands, and that this really was just the way his son was, because even though he was walking the path of a dominator, he still wanted to protect the weak. So the Patriarch decides to test whether that bond truly meant something, and sends Khan back with the news that Jean would receive his first official mission. And in January of 1795, Jean is finally recognized as a 3-star knight at just 15, and during the break, while some cadets went back home, others kept training on their own. And when they advanced to the intermediate class, the cadets stop using wooden swords and start using real blades, these swords being custom made, with many receiving brand new ones, and Jean deciding to choose a sword from the clan's armory. So after a while, Luna ends up bringing his sword, saying it took a lot of effort to find one that truly suited him. Basically, about a month earlier, Luna had begged him to let her choose his sword, and even though Jean wasn't too eager about it, he still recognized that Luna had a better eye for picking the right weapon for him. And when she reveals the sword, which was practically her height, Jean is shocked by the sheer size of that blade. She explains that this sword, known as the Bales Massacre, was one she had used before herself, and that it served as the base for the weapon she currently uses. So when she asks if Jean liked it, he thanks her, but admits it didn't feel like the right sword for him, and Luna tries to hide that she's hurt, brushing it off as a joke, but Jean catches her reaction immediately. She mentions that the Bales Massacre really was an excellent sword, even a bit heavy, but nothing too overwhelming. Yet seeing Jin's lack of excitement, she decides to show him another one, saying she had spent a long time thinking about which sword would truly fit him, and that this next one would be good specifically for him and no one else. Since he chose the Berizada during the selection ritual, she imagined the best option would be the sister blade to the Berizada, which was the Bradamanti, and Jean, recognizing the sword immediately, says that Bradamanti is incredible and even considered a legend within the clan. And he feels that it's the only sword he'll ever need, no matter what happens, so Jean becomes genuinely grateful, acknowledging how much effort Luna put into bringing that weapon to him. Though Luna says he doesn't need to thank her, even as she notices that Jean still seems uncomfortable with her presence. That makes her really sad, and when Jean tries to explain, she starts teasing him, saying that now he'd have to mend his little sister's broken heart. And when Jean asks what she means by that, she tells him to close his eyes because the training is about to start, then asks if he has any idea about what she's about to say, and when he assumes he does, she adds that there's one more lesson he still needs to learn. So, curious, he asks what it is, and she answers with a very serious tone, saying that while some siblings are too busy destroying themselves, there are others who love him genuinely, and she asks him to keep that deep in his heart, adding that she doesn't want to be hurt by her little brother again. And when Jean begins apologizing, she cuts him off and says that even before he was born, she had already been feeling lonely within her own family for a very long time. And that's exactly why she doesn't want him to experience that same loneliness, which was the reason she behaved the way she did, hoping he would understand. And right after that, she tells him to continue the training, instructing him to see with his mind. After the training, the boy goes to Muraka to ask his opinion about the sword, and Muraka simply says he should keep that blade stored for now, because he still lacks the spiritual control needed to wield it freely. And according to Muraka, to properly handle the Bradamanti, he would need at least a 3-star spiritual level, but in terms of spiritual power, Jean was still only a 2. He adds that Jean could barely simulate the sword's awakening, but Jean insists he's about to reach that level. Though Muraka loses patience and warns Jean that Bradamanti and Berizada are not swords someone can use just because they want to, reinforcing that the bare minimum is having 3 stars, and that until he reaches 5 stars, he should treat the sword like an ordinary blade. But Jean says he isn't that patient, asking if, by reaching 5 stars by the end of the year, he'd be allowed to use it. And Muraka gets irritated, saying that not even a prodigy with spiritual energy could accomplish such a thing, also adding that he's only being harsh because he cares about Jean, telling him to drop those fantasies. But then Jean, wanting to push back, grabs the book Muraka was reading and threatens to tear it apart. He asks Muraka if he still saw him as just a child, and at that moment Muraka tries to calm him down, asking him to put the book down, and right then, Dilly arrives and asks what was going on, so she fills Jean and Muraka in on the situation. She tells them that the instructor had been looking for Jean, and that normally he would come in person, but this time he specifically asked for Jean to go meet him so he could give him a plan that involved maps, and Jean, surprised, asks what kind of plan that was, and Dilly replies that he had just received his first mission. This mission would start as soon as the break ended, and Jean is stunned, but he understands that the timing made sense since he had reached the 3-star swordsmanship level. And Dilly also mentions that missions like this usually only show up once a swordsman enters the intermediate class, so it might have something to do with his official transfer, and he says he'll go check that out, asking Dilly to stay with Muraka. He then goes to instructor Garen, saying he heard about the mission, and Garen confirms it, explaining that Jean and 9 other cadets from the beginner class had been chosen, and that the mission was an escort assignment along the southern border of the Kingdom of Zon, and Jean immediately realizes that area was close to Beastmen territory, specifically the White Wolf tribe. He thinks to himself that this kind of mission was far too advanced for beginner cadets, and on top of that, he notices that the selected cadets were exactly the ones with the lowest grades in the class, and of course, Belope was among them, which makes Jean suspect the mission was deliberately chosen to be difficult for him because of his fight with Belope. Realizing it might be a test from his father, he decides he would prove that his father's trust was well placed, and 4 days later, at the operations base, the instructor reveals that the mission was to look for the successor of the Bill clan in the Kingdom of Zon, and once they arrived, they would set up a central camp on the border and split into groups to try to find the boy. Every day, one member would have to return and report the results of the patrol, so Jean tells them to stop calling him Young Master and start treating him as the captain and thinking through the mission. He also says that the injured should stay in the camp to recover, while the rest focused on finding the surviving heir of the clan. At their first stop, Belope reports that he saw a tribe of water-tail beastmen, and Jean thinks that's no problem, because that type of beast avoids predators and is usually docile, so there was no danger, and he orders Belope to return to the base 2 hours ahead of them and move to Zone 13. The other cadets should investigate the area, because even though everything looked calm, Jean still suspected something was off, believing that since this mission came directly from his father, things were not supposed to be this easy. And then the water-tail beastmen approach the group and call them Mendigos, showing sympathy and even offering them food. Jean accepts it and says that one day he would return the kindness, then warns them that beyond Zone 13, they would officially be in Beastmen territory and cadets in training wouldn't stand a chance against them, so they shouldn't rush for results, and he would continue the investigations himself over the next 4 days. And that's when Belope appears and reports that the 2nd Division fell into an ambush. Jean immediately orders everyone to get ready and asks Belope what the situation was. And Belope explains that the group tried running from something but wasn't able to return to report what happened. And when Jean asks if they were attacked by beastmen, Belope says no. The attackers were actually humans. There were only 3 of them, but they still managed to take down the entire division. And Jean, realizing that for an ambush like that to happen there had to be more people involved than it seemed, orders cadets Editon and David to scout the area. But he stresses that they must not engage under any circumstances and that if they spotted any threat, they were to report back to him immediately. While Jean thinks through the entire situation, he realizes there were too many variables in that ambush, and that makes him even more curious, because they attacked the 13th Division instead of the 1st, which was incredibly strange, but regardless of the reason, he promises that whoever dared to mess with the run candles would pay for it. Soon after, they end up finding bloodstains along the path, and Belope panics, thinking Mesa might have been killed, but Jean reassures him and says the blood was still fresh, which meant the fight happened recently, and there were no signs of bodies or human remains. It looked like a confrontation happened, but the 2nd Division must have managed to escape, and by examining the tracks, Jean notices there was only one attacker, and among the scattered objects, he finds a blood-soaked bandana. When he asks where it was found, he concludes they probably detected the enemy and fled west, confirming that the ambush division retreated in that direction. So he tells Sierra to go to Eddie Tun and David and update them on the current situation, while he and Bello continue moving forward. On the way, they end up spotting the members of the 2nd Division. But there's a problem. Mesa wasn't there. They had fallen into yet another ambush at that very moment. So Jean tells Bello to close his eyes and, after 2 seconds, still with his eyes closed, take down the enemy on the left, and remembering one of Maraka's teachings, that anything involving spiritual power gains an extremely amplified cutting force and is far harder to detect. Jean strikes one of the attackers while Bello appears behind the other to restrain him.